Good afternoon. My name is Jessica Isquith. I'm here representing PICMG, the standards organization. As of January 2017, I was elected to be the president. We currently have 4 officers, 3 of whom are in the room right now, including Michael Monroe, who's been an officer at PICMG for the last 14 plus years, and Justin Mole in the corner, who also last year came on as the vice president of marketing. Being here has a lot of interesting emotions, but one word that came up in at least 3 of the presentations thus far was mentor. And as I came up starting as an engineer, designing medical equipment 20 plus years ago, staying in the embedded world in various parts of business engineering, marketing, mentors were key in this space. One was mentioned earlier, and that was Martin Plotkin, still is a great counsel from GDCA. The other is Joe Pavlot, amongst others. So just want to acknowledge, most people in this room know he passed last year. He was critical in kind of the evolution of PICMG, along with a number of people sitting in this room and your organizations. And now that it's 24 years into kind of the evolution of PICMG, a lot's changed, and the new team that's leading it has brought in some new ideas, a lot of changes. So for those of you familiar with PICMG, it's still running very strong. There's various energy. You'll see on the side there some of the 9, not all of them, but some of the families of specifications and standards that have come out of PICMG over the years. To my chagrin, I have had a couple of conversations today where people are like, I didn't realize Common Express was PICMG. Yes, and also a comment about Compact PCI. We're all believers in open standards, and we all should be working together and collaborating more for the future, for both the good of the embedded industry and the good for all of the individual companies that are work within the space. So with that, I prepared the first presentation, so first time PICMG's a sponsor here, sent it to Jerry, and we all know Jerry's quite kind in his feedback. So he said, you missed a couple memos. You have, I do like slide 26 and 27. So the fact that there were that many was a problem. And of course, those slides kind of reflect one of the major initiatives that we're working on that is being, from a technical detail level, led by our CTO, who is the 4th officer and not here today, and that's Doug Sandy, who many of you may have known from his time at Emerson, Motorola, Artisan, and he's now moved to academia and is playing a critical role in our future and some of the initiatives that we have, including some of our activities within industrial IoT. So with that, it works for me here, I know. So everyone's aware of the Internet of Things. It's come up in different ways. We just heard about the ocean of things, and someone brought up about this having more going on than the plane that got us here. So we all know about that. Within, particularly in the consumer Internet of Things, there's also within that the industrial Internet of Things. And that gets more towards the heavy machinery. A lot of what PICMG's history is based on was industrial automation, particularly with Compact PCI and some of our other standards. And there's sort of an interesting evolution between industrial automation and how it affects and impacts industrial IoT. In terms of industrial IoT, in terms of consumer IoT, there's adoption. I mean, it started in the 90s at MIT and Berkeley with discussions, I think officially coined in 2004, the term, but over 10 years later, there's still some concerns. And they primarily are technologically because of technical concerns around cybersecurity, sociological concerns about privacy, and also economic in terms of cost benefit. So all of that being valid, in the industrial space, it's a little more controlled. All of those things are still need to be addressed, but it's where kind of, I think, certain leadership can happen and adoption that then will flow back into the consumer space, as we've seen in other markets. So key things of the industrial Internet of Things are IIoT, ubiquitous sensing. So there's sensors everywhere. So where you maybe used to know, okay, what's the temperature of a certain asset within my factory? Now think you can know so much more, but the number of sensors throughout every bit is just exponentially growing. You also have the opportunity within industrial IoT to intersect with your IT technologies. So that way your IT infrastructure, those skill sets, those tools, those standards can be applied now way into the industrial space that they hadn't been in the past. And that gets to kind of the integration of operational technology and information technology. And then of course, advanced analytics. So whereas consumer Internet of Things needed cloud computing to get their analytics, artificial intelligence, now on the industrial side, those three elements I just mentioned are also key. And is there a market to be had? Is it something that a standards organization should focus on, or companies? Yes. When different things come into play, you hear about billions of dollars here or there. Between what's happening in the sensor market and its exponential growth, the IoT market and its growth, I can list 10 other research things, and any of the researchers in here may have comment later. What I started to look for was who's saying that there is not a market for industrial IoT and that it's not growing over the next 10 years. I couldn't find one. So whether it's 3 billion or 300 billion, over what period of time, to be determined. But the market's here now and growing, but has gaps that we'll discuss. So what are people who are trying to implement IoT looking for? The only reason to do it would be improve efficiency, reduce downtime, preventive maintenance, all of these things. Otherwise, there's no value. Otherwise, they're just collecting data to not create information. That information needs to improve the bottom line and through increased efficiencies, reduced downtime, and various things. Also, and those are some of the aspects that historically, whether it's industrial automation, different applications that PICMG standards, as well as VITA standards, and many other organizations have been able to address and help a community of companies work towards. Okay, so all is great, but it's messy, right? So we're gonna improve efficiency, we're gonna reduce downtime, we're gonna change everything, everything's gonna be connected, it's gonna be smart, we're gonna solve cybersecurity. It takes a lot of work and it needs to be addressed from various facets. And as such, many different communities are coming together to address this. And so when the same people who said, this is what I want from it, are asked about the challenges, well, why don't you just do it? Some of the top things, cybersecurity. I don't think that surprises anybody. I think we're hearing about it more and more every day, and it's a problem that doesn't have a solution, it's evolving. So as the bar gets tighter, new things can come in, different types of hacks. So that will always be ongoing. From a PICMG perspective, it's something we want to incorporate, but it's not our primary area of expertise. So we look at the next two: lack of standardization, legacy install base. So when we talk about standardization within IoT, there's many different aspects. We'll go into that in a moment. And also legacy install base. We have a history of making it a priority or a key characteristic that we have backward compatibility and a way of kind of bridging technologies. We plan to continue doing that in any kind of IoT initiatives. Okay, so look, you all know many standards organizations, and you probably recognize some of these. And if we wanted, we could have 3 slides that listed more organizations that are all working on IoT. Great work's being done. One of the things that we're seeing more and more of, and is definitely one of the things that PICMG, when we think about IoT, we know is key to our success, is collaboration. So the All Seen Alliance, the IoT, various organizations listed here are all bringing things to the puzzle, but we're also all starting to work together more. I think, just as a slight tangent, between PICMG and VITA's history, there is success in collaboration. Besides the large overlap in members, so there's a large overlap in expertise, I think about like hardware platform management and the work that was initially done in PICMG, but by members of both organizations, adopted through advanced TCA, and now incorporated into VPX. And it was done in such a way that's helped both, but maybe it would have been better if we were working more closely together earlier on in that process and be able to bring things back and forth. Another thing that's happening right now, our initiative, is the rugged ComExpress. And ComExpress is key in terms of our IoT initiatives. The VITA organization has had a program going to kind of put a mechanical clamshell and ruggedize the ComExpress. That's an area where right now we could be working maybe closer together to get over the finish line and see how we can get out and promote its adoption. But so standards organizations in this context are huge. There's also potentially a space within VITA, but right now we're active and we're collaborating. So again, one of the challenges, but that's also bringing opportunity that I already mentioned, is information technology and operational technologies convergence. And what that also means is new skill sets or different skill sets than we're used to in the embedded space working. And that is refreshing. Because one of the things that we're facing, and when I speak to different companies, we want to get kind of this next generation of engineers excited about hardware, excited about embedded, and that gets back to my first comment about mentors. But I think now that the embedded is intertwined with IT and these various things, it makes it all a bit more interesting for everybody, because you can't be so siloed and you're thinking, no, I do this. It's getting further and further weaved together, these different disciplines. So if you have your expertise, working more closely with the people with other expertise is important, and understanding each other's language is what's critical as we move forward. However, there's still a number of concerns, but that was sort of a key point there. So now that we've talked about like IoT, industrial IoT, forms working together, that's still quite broad. So one of the areas that PICMG we're particularly focused on is the smart factory. And using this as an example, but it's highly applicable to other aspects of industrial IoT. But within this, we can start to see where we could see some value and some standards that can apply elsewhere. Many of you are probably familiar with this, but the smart factory will use both the IT infrastructure to connect to your operational infrastructure, from all the sensors we talked about in environmental control through your factory floor control center. And yes, we still have to make sure it's secure. So PICMG has a number of standards, as we've already mentioned, many of which, without us having a formal initiatives, were already being adopted into industrial IoT. A number of the companies here have ComExpress product, have a number of different PICMG standards products, but in particular with ComExpress, it's being used quite a bit in terms of going down to the sensors and connecting them locally. Because you still need, for a lot of this hardened equipment, you need the ruggedization, you also need to be close by. So it's not like you're just connecting it into your Ethernet network. But via Ethernet, you can then have local ComExpress talking to a number of sensors and actuators, and then that feeding back up. You also, as we mentioned, one of the concerns people have is legacy equipment. So we're also able to kind of take some legacy PLC, bring that up into a gateway, and or use ComExpress when it's small, local, when you need to be close by. But then when you can aggregate larger things, that's where some of our more scalable systems come into play, particularly compact PCI serial, and we're also seeing interest for micro TCA in that space. All right, so we kind of said where it's being used today, and that was just by us kind of doing some discovery. From, as PICMG officers, we kind of know I could tell you what standards sell, what activity is going on, but we don't always know every application of our members. We're trying to get closer to our members to understand that. But it was sort of through some of that discovery as, oh, they're already using ComExpress in this way. But we realized, okay, how do we make ComExpress more desirable and more easily adopted for other companies and other end users who are facing these industrial IoT challenges? And so we've come up with a few things, one of which is potentially a new specification, particularly where we'd work closely with sensor vendors so that they can interface their sensors into the full IoT infrastructure. And that might take we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but the space of a stamp. And also a developer's kit. This is a little bit of a deviation from what PICMG traditionally does. But whether to the point we may manufacture it, or ideally some of our multiple partners or members will want to manufacture it, but where we define a developer's kit specifically for IoT with a number of sensor interfaces and protocols that here's the specification, you can go manufacture it. If we don't find people to do that, we might then produce it so that people can quickly get going. There's many different sensors out there. We know that there's a smaller number of interfaces, but if we can put those interfaces on, again, really as like a traditional breadboard, but a developer's kit for this based on ComExpress. The other problem we've recognized is that amongst all the standardization going on, there isn't a common or a unified data, a metadata model to kind of know what's happening, so that you can go down to the sensor level all the way up to factory control and know both discover, monitor, and control your sensors and actuators. So this is an area that isn't traditionally in the PICMG space. We've done stuff with hardware platform management, but to kind of develop a metadata model hasn't been our past. So, but we have the expertise within our organizations to do so. And but here again would be a time where we say, who out there is already doing stuff like this? And the DMTF organization, which has developed Redfish and has a RESTful API called Redfish, which makes sense in this context. They've been doing this for data centers where they can do the full discovery and have a unified data model. We want to apply that to IIoT. Not theirs, but actually work with them where we can define the schema under the context of DMTF and kind of cross-reference each other. So that's things that we're doing. The ComExpress IoT Developer Kit, I've already mentioned, but this will be kind of fun and different. And we've already have a couple of members who are interested, so we'll be starting a working committee soon to define the requirements. So the thing that's unknown is, does that project end by saying, here's the specification based upon the requirements and now anyone can go do it? Or if we don't have the volunteers, because it's not a production product, so the business case may or may not be there for some of our members, then we might go ahead and then offer it to the members. I briefly mentioned a postage stamp, kind of, that'd be a new form factor, and this would be to kind of fill the gap between some of both the legacy sensors and new IoT-enabled sensors to get them directly into the network infrastructure of the factory or other industrial environments. Be small, it doesn't need a lot, like, so term like just enough IO, very low power, low processing, but really to connect that lowest level assets, the sensors, which are the nervous system of the system, and kind of bring it all up. And it would also support the metadata model that we mentioned. So we are, our cooperation with DMTF, they've done excellent work. Another example of what they've done was the Open Compute Platform, like what they're doing for data centers and servers in general. So they've created a schema specific to OCP. We're going to be we're talking to them about something similar for IoT. And so we have a number of TEs here, but in terms of having sensor companies participate in it, we know that's key. So we have a couple of members right now in that space, but we're actively looking to work with more sensor companies because they would need to be able to adopt this, to integrate, and then also ideally some large potential customers to get their voice in, which is how we've had success in the past with standards when we have the voice of the user, the customer, and all integrated up into the engineering expertise of our members. So as we've discussed, companies want and are planning to implement IoT. There are some challenges, and the consortia and alliances are going to be key to filling the gap so that whether some of the large companies that we could mention who can kind of have their proprietary solutions and the small companies who don't have the leverage to kind of standardize, that's where we come in. Whether it's that list I mentioned, VITA, PICMG, these consortium kind of help bridge the gap so we don't have a couple huge companies controlling the space and that the voice of the small companies are never heard. So thank you, and I encourage you all to continue your participation. And with that, if there are any questions on this or any PICMG topics, Justin, Michael, and I are here. Michael's got other things going on as well, but to answer any questions during the meetings, the sessions, or the networking events. Thank you.